you so much. Our final speaker before lunch will be Hannah. One of the most important things about this program, as I mentioned, is it is student motivated, and every year the students do a whole heck of a lot to make this a better program. And this group, as I've said a million times, is particularly exceptional. So deciding who to offer the opportunity to partner with me to help build this summer and build the program going forward as the summer TA. It's way more than a TA job. It's finding speakers, designing assignments. We've had some really, really spectacular people in that role. Annika, Mackenzie, Chrissy, Tamara, Amy have left amazing impacts on this program. And throughout this year, Hannah has just shown, number one, that she really gets the program. She came in with a lot of energy and great thoughts about thinking locally, and then by the end of the program was learning how to take that vision of improving local systems and how to translate that to the kind of systems thinking where her work can also benefit the whole world. And I think through this year, she's followed the trajectory from these are my interests associated with climate to this is the situation on the ground in the world, and this is what I can do to make a difference. And has really learned a ton in this program, has been a great leader, has brought speakers in for us, and has really just done it right. And I think did a really superb capstone here that has really tangible deliverables and tangible results. And after Hannah, we will have lunch. And it's really been a pleasure to have Hannah in the group this year. And we will end with this. And then after Hannah, we'll do the lunch and then come back here around 1 o'clock. So thanks everybody for your attention this morning. Hannah, you are up.
Thank you, Corey. I really appreciate that introduction. Just 1 second while I'll pull mine up. Okay. Well, thank you all for joining us today. My name is Hannah Gruen, and I will be speaking about integrating food systems into regional climate planning, a food security, climate resilience, and adaptation strategy for San Diego and hopefully beyond. I would first like to acknowledge that the space that we are sharing right now was built on the unceded territory of the Kumeyaay Nation. I'd like to honor their tremendous contributions to this region and thank them for their stewardship. The first day of our climate science and policy degree, Corey said something that stuck with me, and I wanted to share it with all of you. He said, "It's not just about the landing, it's about the fall." And what that means to me is that we need to actively safeguard human lives and well-being as we race top speeds towards a global catastrophe. This is the core motivation for my work, centered on establishing resilient food systems to ensure that people can live healthy lives as we work to avoid the worst consequences of a warming climate. And so with that, this brief presentation on integrating food systems into regional climate planning, I will first introduce in broad strokes how the climate crisis is impacting our food systems. We'll discuss why that spurs the need for local responses and what that could look like, share the results from an analysis, and share with a key deliverable, or end with a key deliverable. Climate change touches every part of our food system. You are looking at a NASA projection showing corn yield losses as early as 2030. You'll see some scattered increases shown in green, but as we progress throughout the climate crisis, the color red really starts to paint our globe. The climate that we are creating could reduce global crop yields up to 24% by the end of the century. Meanwhile, 1 in 4 people worldwide are severely food insecure. In the near future, we will see significant changes in where we can grow and where those growers will go. So, how do we address present and future food insecurity while mitigating the crisis at large? There is not a silver bullet answer, but we need to start somewhere, and it requires extensive multi-solving. Over 1/3 of San Diegans are nutrition insecure, 39% being children and disproportionately impacting BIPOC communities. San Diego County has a collective opportunity and a responsibility to build a resilient and equitable food system that actively supports mitigation efforts and improves food security. The global food system is failing to address food insecurity and malnutrition in an environmentally sustainable way. Our food system accounts for approximately 33% of greenhouse gas emissions. So in response, we must reduce our sources while also supporting sinks. This requires shifting agricultural practices from conventional to regenerative, addressing food waste in diets to mitigate those short-lived climate pollutants like methane, and converting our degraded land to sinks, and also protecting and restoring ecosystems. Simultaneously, the risks associated with climate change's impacts on the food system are too substantial to ignore. Food availability will become increasingly challenged. Nutrients are expected to deplete with an increased atmospheric concentration of carbon dioxide, nutrients like protein, zinc, iron. Access will be jeopardized by price spikes, all chipping away at stability in the global food system. The 4 pillars of food security should be used to design and establish locally attuned, adaptive, responsive, and safe systems that co-linearly reduces emissions while also supporting sinks. Converting publicly owned open space to small-scale regenerative agriculture sites could play a key role in establishing a resilient local food system, but by how much? So to better understand the potential benefits of this regional opportunity, my project was centered on 4 main objectives. The first was to advocate for the integration of food systems in city-level climate planning. The second was to identify eligible open space that could be, or that should be prioritized for climate-related food security projects. The third was to quantify the potential of food security and carbon sequestration benefits based on equitable implementation. And lastly, to incorporate those findings and recommendations into a tangible deliverable, a story map that has interactive maps and a bunch of information for city planners and stakeholders, and also the tools for analysis, replication, and expansion. In November, I connected with my committee chair, Brenda Garcia, a research and policy analyst at the Climate Action Campaign. And thanks to her support and efforts, this project's potential elevated from a research endeavor to have real tremendous actionable potential. So as of April, food systems are now a component of the Climate Action Campaign's report card scoring system. And create healthy food systems was included as a key recommendation. So that's very exciting. Additionally, I met with various local organizations to understand how my project could best align and amplify the incredible groundwork of food resilient systems that have already occurred in San Diego. And so I would like to express gratitude to the following individuals and organizations: Bea Alvarez with Foodshed and Carbon Sink Farms, Consuelo Martinez with the San Diego Food Systems Alliance, Ron Finley at the Ron Finley Project, he's in LA, which is great, a little bit broader, and Josh Alsup with the International Rescue Committee. I'd also like to thank Heidi Batchelor, who is a marine GIS aficionado here at Scripps. Awesome. My next objective was to better understand how much eligible open space existed among the 15 municipalities that are reviewed by the Climate Action Campaign's report card. So I built a modifiable, replicable geospatial model to identify eligible open space with key criteria that prioritizes equity and suitable environmental features. I'll walk you through a very simplified version of the model that I created to identify eligible open space and the exciting results, and we will put together one of the several deliverables that I created. To begin identifying eligible open space, I first established a baseline criteria that all potential conversion sites should have or be filtered for, including that they're publicly owned, open space that's not an environmentally sensitive area. I then created 3 tiers based on project deployment priority that promotes access. Priority 1 being the top tier initial deployment with, and that eligible open space has to be within priority populations as deemed by the Cal EPA Cal Enviro Screen 4.0. The second priority group has a 2-mile buffer on those priority populations, so just extending that range a bit more. And the third priority group has no priority population specification. It's just simply within municipal boundaries. And there's also an adjusted slope. I have all the criteria and information in my story map. Don't have time to dive too much deeper. So my analysis found 1,461 acres of priority 1 eligible open space, 3,485 acres of priority 2 eligible open space, and 5,652 acres of priority 3 eligible open space. And so let's look at what some of those annual benefits look like. So if we fully converted priority 1 eligible open space or an equivalent acreage, we could, and using regenerative agricultural practices like no-till, cover crop rotation, no pesticides, no fertilizers that are synthetic, et cetera, we could grow about 47 million pounds of crops, provide 39 million meals with that, and we could sequester over 1,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide annually after 4 years of regenerative agricultural practices. These benefits substantially increase when we widen the parameters and we implement priority 2 and priority 3 eligible open space. Given the importance of equity, wow, that's very challenging to see. It's very nice on my screen. I apologize for that. Well, you would see on the left, and I guess you can see it in my story map eventually one day, that regardless of what the Cal EPA deems as a priority population, we should be really amplifying these communities and allowing the projects to be coming from them first and foremost, and allowing this project to be data informed rather than data driven, meaning regardless of what the Cal EPA deems as a priority population, there are systemically underserved communities that exist beyond those data points that should also be acknowledged and prioritized. Okay, that shows up better, that's great. Cool. So my analysis developed 4 groups of municipalities based on their current eligible open space and the presence of or proximity to priority populations. This first group, the city of San Diego, Chula Vista, Oceanside, San Marcos, and Escondido, they all have a lot of eligible open space and they have a lot of priority populations. And so my recommendations are tailored based off of these 4 categories. The next, having low eligible open space and high priority populations. Those include Vista, National City, La Mesa, Imperial Beach, and Lemon Grove. The next group has a high amount of space, but a low number of priority populations. Those include Carlsbad and Encinitas. And lastly, Coronado, Del Mar, and Solana Beach all have a low amount of eligible open space and a low number of priority populations. And so our response and implementation and also strategizing for other recommendations should be based on who has available land, who has the most priority populations, and how can we distribute equitably. Despite an abundance of food rescue projects, San Diegans still lack about 13.5 million meals per month, or 168 million meals per year, to be nutritionally secure. And if we fully converted priority 1 eligible open space to regenerative ag or a equivalent acreage, we could close the meal gap with just those 11 core crops by 24%. If we converted priority 2 eligible open space, we could close the meal gap by about 58%. And full implementation of priority 3, we could close the meal gap in San Diego County by 94%. So my deliverable includes a story map, and there are plenty of resources for cities on here that show what their annual benefits are, and a map, an interactive map for each municipality. So here I clicked on Lemon Grove. You can select for which classification in the priority population you're interested in viewing, in what priority level space. So here I selected priority 1. And you can navigate to see what that space really looks like. The reason for building an interactive map like this is because when I was connecting with stakeholders in the area, there was a lot of interest in pursuing these projects. As a matter of fact, I had one member say that they had many refugees and immigrants that wanted to grow. They came here with so many skills. They just don't know where to expand, and they didn't know where that space could be found. So this is a great tool for them. Additionally, suitability of those environmental considerations are relevant and important too. So I created a regional suitability interactive map where you can again select for the different priority classification. And on the right, I have different layers showing priority 1, 2, and 3. You can see vegetation. You can see runoff mitigation potential, precipitation at each individual site, in addition to the City of San Diego's water line or recycled water line. And when you select the individual parcel, you can click through the information to see what those different parameters are or what the results are. At the end of my story map, I have a tools to replicate section. And the intent of this is that this model that I created can be very easily replicated just by importing your own data. And so I have all the data sets that I included for my analysis for environmental, municipal, and equity data, and also model access instructions. I put a picture of my model. Nobody has to rebuild that. You just simply replace the data sets that you put into it, so long as they're easy to swap. So in conclusion, for key takeaways, establishing a climate resilient food system should be a unified priority action across all climate action plans. We must be willing to rethink the perceived limitations of the square footage that we need to sustain ourselves. And lastly, the climate is changing, so our systems must too. Thank you.
Great job. I was really impressed by your results.
Thank you.
I'm wondering, like, if, say, we were to use all of that available land for agriculture, how do you make sure that the food or the produce is going to the people who need it the most?
Yeah.
Like, is this like, it would be like community gardens so people can choose to use it, or?
Right,
Yeah.
so there are a couple of phenomenal options and organizations throughout San Diego County that address this very problem of distributing food appropriately and also making sure that food is coming from farms that are practicing carbon sink practices, things that actually benefit our climate and environment rather than degrade it. And like Food Shed and Food Shed, they have a phenomenal system where they directly connect farmers in an equitable way, get that food out to people. And it's really a community effort and a strategic network of organizations that would be necessary to partner with cities to ensure that that food is getting out to people's plates, because yeah, that's a huge issue. The last thing we would want is to create all of these projects that produce local organic, I mean, let me back that one up. That would be a fantastic thing. But we really do want to make sure that it's getting to people's plates who need it, so that we can be closing that meal gap as opposed to just reaching the top tier of individuals.
Do you happen to have any numbers on expected costs of implementing this type of system for, and potentially as a secondary question, potential side benefits, secondary benefits of, say, I imagine someone's going to have to farm and upkeep these plots of land. Would this involve hiring people and that kind of thing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are great questions. So, where to start? I have so many things that I would like to respond with, but I need to limit it. I'm going to start with I'm going to start with cost. So, there aren't very many studies, really, that look at localizing food systems and what cost that entails. Actually, for my economics paper back in the fall, I wrote a cost-benefit analysis framework for localizing San Diego's food system. That would take a lot more work to actually implement that cost-benefit analysis. But there really are few analyses done that show the true cost of what that would be. There are some really interesting ways of acquiring funding for projects like this. For one, limiting the amount of really unhealthy things that come. And the Navajo Nation and City of Berkeley back in 2014 passed I'm going to butcher the name, but like a high sugar tax, essentially, where that funding then goes towards community projects that benefit, creating a healthy food system. And so there is that. And then for co-benefits, I started a list starting with A, and I started going in alphabetical order for what the co-benefits are for projects like this. And I was like, by the end of this, I'm going to make it to Z, and I assure you I did. That would have flooded one of these slides. But everything from human health and well-being to decreasing crime rates to educational practices. I could go on for a very long time about the benefits associated with that. And that is like a non-market value that would have to be accounted for as well.
Well, excellent work. I mean, I just wanted to add a bit to that answer about cost, because I know that that's the biggest question, right? How are we going to pay for this? And it's really important. The work that Hannah and really everybody here is doing is really important because, for one, the city of San Diego, for instance, it already has a climate action plan, right? It has a resiliency plan. Now, what the city needs to do, like every city in the region, is to get the funding. So this is why before I asked this question about implementation funding plans, because right now there are billions of dollars available for climate projects, coming from the state and coming from the federal government. And so it's really important that really everybody advocates, the city and the region, to ensure they get those funding, those funds. Going back to Hannah's work, I just wanted to say thank you so much. I mean, your work is excellent. Really, everyone's work here is excellent, and it really helps us, organizations like Climate Action Campaign, to continue our advocacy work, because, again, solutions are there. We just really need to push for the funding and the political will to implement these types of projects. So, yeah, thank you, Hannah.
Thank you, Brenda.